Good evening, kiddies. Let's take a step back in time, a time in boxing history, and visit one of the greats of boxing. But before we do, please subscribe, hit the noti bell, hit the like button, and comment. I'd appreciate it so much. It would mean so much to me and the channel here at CoolKegs Productions. Now back to the story. Once known as a true monster, his mere stare could fill his opponents with dread, giving him the edge in a fight that usually had his sheer power easily winning the day. His haymakers hurt like bombs, though he always felt disrespected, not given his proper due as a boxer. He felt his world crashed down, or so he thought, one fateful night, the night when he faced Muhammad Ali, who in his brilliance developed the rope-a-dope strategy which he used to wear down our fighter mentally and physically, eventually being felled by Ali in the 8th round in the legendary fight known as the Rumble in the Jungle, a fight I have on this channel. George Foreman was not the same after that night, blaming everything but himself for losing the fight, doing all he thought he could do to prove he was still a pugilistic monster. The problem was no one thought he wasn't. So his actions made him out more the bad guy bully rather than the babyface making a comeback for the title he so honestly wanted the fans to believe he was doing. The once thought unstoppable beast, George Foreman, being outsmarted by Ali, made him pursue fights to repair his unstoppable moniker. But as I said before, it made him out a bully, especially one night when he fought and beat multiple journeyman boxers. But he did prove his resistance and power against a similar opponent in Ron Lyle, a fight where Foreman said their hits were so strong that they didn't hurt. They disrupted the nerve flow from the brain to the body. A fight where multiple knockdowns were performed by each, with George Foreman eventually winning. But one night hit George Foreman like a hammer on his march back up to claim his title back. That was when he lost to Jimmy Young, a fight that shocked the pugilistic world and changed Foreman forever. He had a religious experience during the fight or after the fight and left boxing suddenly with a finality rarely seen in such a competitive spirit. The next 10 plus years, the only time Foreman thought about boxing was to acknowledge his loss to Ali and, more importantly, become an evangelist and devoted husband and father of 5 sons and 5 daughters. And in 1984, he opened up George Foreman's Youth and Community Center, using his entire savings to offer scholarships to kids so they could go to school. But eventually, due to things out of his control, he was in danger of losing the youth center, and he decided to dust off his gloves and re-enter the ring 13 years after losing his title to Muhammad Ali. Even his wife said, "George, you're too old, 300 pounds, they're going to kill you." But George wasn't looking to win overnight. He knew how hard the road back was going to be. He had committed to the long game. He knew how to promote. He knew what he had to do to get in shape. All he had to do was do it. No one took him seriously, but they were inspired by the fat old man, holding Foreman up as a joke, but he kept on winning and winning. Many even writing Foreman begging him to not do it, but like Foreman said, in all them letters, there wasn't a dime in the mail, so he kept on plugging back into form, and everyone laughing and saying he's not fighting anyone. But though he has a belly and he likes to joke, he still has unbelievable punching power that could murk a fighter in one hit. He was becoming a household favorite, everyone rooting for the old fat man, though none gave him a chance in hell. Foreman, the boxer, was famous, but Foreman, the salesman, was a pure juggernaut. He had sitcoms. Oh, spoke for Meineke.
Now that I'm in the Meineke corner, if anyone says you have to pay a lot to get high quality muffler service, you know what to tell them. I am not going to pay a lot for this muffler. By George, I think he's got it. No.
And then became the spokesman for a household grilling item that took off like a rocket. The George Foreman grill, earning him $5 million a month. Checks started just rolling in. He even sold out for over $140 million or so.
Guys, you're all right. It's my G5 with 5 removable cooking plates, so it makes all of your favorite foods, and it knocks off the fat.
The George Foreman G5.
The jovial fat man still donned his boxing gloves, for he had a vision years in the making. He saw a vision of winning back the belt he lost so many years ago. Money wasn't the factor anymore, winning was. And he still had the highest KO percentage of all heavyweight fighters. And although his weight stayed around the 260 mark, his power never waned. And when he hit someone, he damn near paralyzed them. And after 22 victories, he finally had his chance when he faced Evander Holyfield. Holyfield was 28 years old, the undisputed champion, facing a 42-year-old Foreman, many called a farce, a facade, but no one was laughing when the fight went the distance. Holyfield saying Foreman hit him harder than anyone had ever hit him before. Foreman, having gone the distance, rocked Evander a few times in the fight, and though Holyfield won by decision, Foreman's trek back to the top wasn't a laughing matter anymore. He was the eighth wonder of the world, an inspiration for older people everywhere, the world over. George did face and lose to Tommy Morrison after this fight during Tommy's meteoric rise and fall, but Foreman wasn't deterred, and at the age of 45, Foreman saw his chance, and he made a call that involved Holyfield losing the title to Michael Moore. So Big George Foreman was going to get one more shot at the title. Everyone called it the big con, that he hadn't earned a championship fight. He hadn't fought in a year and a half since losing to Morrison. But many did have Foreman's side, cheering him on, but they all gave him little more than a puncher's chance against a 25-year-old Michael Moore. Now, like many boxing enthusiasts, I myself believe if the young Foreman had the older Foreman's brains, that would have been the greatest fighter of all time, bar none. And the night of the fight, when he faced Michael Moore, those that betted against him should have asked, why was Foreman wearing the same trunks he wore against Ali 20 years before in the Rumble in the Jungle? There was some relevance to those trunks being worn. For Big Foreman always had Ali on his back, the ghost of Ali. He never could get rid of it, but it fed his hunger. A hunger the younger generation couldn't fathom. He had tasted championship greatness before, and he hungered for it again. Even at the age of 45, he still hungered, a hunger that burned inside of him. And Moore had agreed to face Foreman due to it being what he thought would be an easy fight and a good payday against a reputable fighter who had went the distance against Holyfield. But what he thought was going to be an easy payday ended up turning into a serialistic nightmare starring Big George Foreman. Now, you must understand, the Foreman facing Michael Moore was a totally different man than the one who lost to Muhammad Ali in the Rumble in the Jungle. The old Foreman had been a juggernaut, murking fighters one after the other ever since he won Olympic gold. He used old school tactics like frames, stops, and leverage blocks to keep his opponents off balance, using his size to frame against his opponents while piling on massive blows and powerful jabs. He was influenced by Sonny Liston, and Liston being almost an unstoppable monster, Foreman added to it. He even used skills taught to him by the famous Archie Moore to destroy Smoking Joe Frazier for the title, where directional feints became part of his repertoire. But against Ali, Foreman faced an opponent who out-wrestled him on the ropes and also taunted him relentlessly, getting Foreman out of his game, and Ali's rope-a-dope won the day. And after the loss, Foreman doubted himself, with it ending in leaving the boxing world for over a decade. A religious experience he had felt after the loss to Jimmy Young. 10 years later, Foreman, shaved head and all, brought back Archie Moore, using Archie Moore's cross guard as his defense. Using his rear hand to fend off attacks to his weak points, he used his size, leaning on opponents to wear them down. He can control distance using the cross guard up close and use his old style at distance. He also had a new understanding of his jab, using it to full effect. But he still could give his opponents that near-death experience his power could deliver at a moment's notice, with many finding out how powerful it was. His fight against Holyfield proved he had stamina, as now the jolly old fat man had his sights on Moore and Moore's championship. The belt Foreman so hungered to gain back, the one he lost to Ali so many moons ago, now he saw round one against Moore. He had abandoned his cross guard, using his old long arm tactics, but it seemed though that Foreman's punches had lost their edge. And early in the fight, Teddy Atlas, Moore's manager, told Moore to move more and relax. They had the measure of Foreman's power, and it was found wanting. But those weak punches were Foreman's plan. Foreman's boxing prowess showed in the middle rounds, using his jab to move Moore into position, and Foreman was countering, not being defensive. These punches were forcing Moore to take quite a few punches, punch after punch after punch, though they weren't that hard. By the fifth round, Teddy Atlas, thinking something was amiss, asked Moore to fight more cautiously, take shots to move out of Foreman's range. But Moore felt he had weathered Foreman's best, and Big George's power was a concern for him no more. And this delivered Moore right into Foreman's hands. See, the whole fight, Foreman was holding back his power, lulling Moore into fighting him toe-to-toe. And since Moore ignored Atlas, Moore was going toe-to-toe, and in the seventh, Foreman started circling inside, a no-no against southpaws, but Foreman was basically stating he didn't care about Moore's power. Foreman was wearing on Moore, and Foreman could see it, punch after punch. Moore, though, upped his pace in the 8th and the 9th, and by the 10th, the great Angelo Dundee pleaded with Foreman, "It's now or never." And so the 10th round began. The old jovial shaven head ex-champ George Foreman and the young champ Michael Moore, they meet toe-to-toe in the center of the ring, and Foreman showed everyone the trick he'd been using the whole fight, unleashing his power. As Moore, who was standing in front of him, not realizing Foreman still had the same hurt bombs he was so famous for. Every time Moore was being hit now, he was being pushed back. And Moore, for some reason, couldn't see it. Foreman's punches were twice as fast and twice as hard, and Foreman kept upping the pace, driving Moore back and back and back. See, Foreman had tricked Moore to think he could go toe-to-toe with him. Foreman was charging, and with a minute left in the 10th, Foreman caught Moore with a tight cross, stunning him momentarily. Then he saw his chance, and in Foreman's words, "I threw a sharp left jab, then a strong right that caught him on his forehead, and it made my hand hurt. Not wanting to wail on him until he fell, I decided to bring the shot a little lower." Foreman's second shot caught Moore right on the button, sending the heavyweight champion kissing canvas. Not just this one blow, but the countless blows Foreman had delivered over the course of the fight. And now, 20 years after Ali had outsmarted him, Foreman used Moore's pride against him, outsmarting the young champion. And as the ref counted down the seconds, Big George Foreman stood in the disbelief in the ring, looking around. And as the ref counted Moore out, Big George fell to his knees, praying in the corner. His tale had come full circle. 20 years ago, he had lost the belt he had just took from Michael Moore, a final triumph for Foreman, having rid himself of the ghost of Ali once and for all, becoming a two-time champ at 45 years of age, making most of the boxing world owe him an apology for not believing he had shook the world, becoming the oldest heavyweight champion of all time and ending the legacy of being one of the three men who defined a generation of boxing: Foreman, Ali, and Frazier. And he became one of the greatest boxers of all time. And this is Big Duke 6 with my golden age of boxing. Until next time.